You're listening to the Myerson Line. Life cycles, bicycles, fast lines, and hot takes.
We are now formally and officially live on the Myerson Line podcast. Our guest this week, our second episode, is Bill Laudien. We'll do a proper introduction for Bill in a moment here. As most of you know, we are part of the Wide Angle Podium Network that Spencer Ha. Oh, right. We had this problem last time. I always pronounce Spencer's last name wrong. It's Spencer Howe. And I know that it's Howe, but it's one of those words that you read more than you say. And before I knew how to pronounce his last name, I always said Ha. And so even though I know that it's Howe, every time I read it, I say Ha. Sorry, Spencer. I mean, it's one of my closest friends. He lived with me for longer than he was supposed to, let's just say. And I still pronounce his last name incorrectly. You all know Spencer from the Slow Ride podcast and a number of great other podcasts on that network we're trying to band together. So check that out, Wide Angle Podium Network. And with that, I think we can start with our show. Man, Bill, thank you. First of all, thanks. We don't get to talk enough. So part of what's great about the podcast is I'm going to get to just call in so many people that I wish I could talk to more, that I think are amazing, exceptional people that I care a lot about, that I want to introduce to my other friends, if you know what I mean. And I really think about the show, going that way. And yes, I understand you are very likely to say some embarrassing things about me to the public. And that's fine. I'm prepared. But it's going to be a good show.
Be as sweet as you want to be. It's not going to make one bit of difference.
I know what I signed up for here.
But since you went through your disclaimers and give attention to your sponsors, I think I need to say right from the start that anything that I say in the next hour is going to be completely satire. So if I accuse anybody of giving Sheryl Crow cancer or claim that Tom Danielson was once a man, like it's all hearsay and it's all satire, and no one's lawyer should contact me at any point.
Good luck with that. That's quite, it's already going to be hard to top that kind of intro, but let me tell people who you are to start with. So, man, it's like hard to know where to start. I think when I talk about you to people that don't know you and I'm trying to say, oh, hey, do you know Bill? One of the first things I say is he was my first DS. He was my first pro team director. He's the guy that hired me to ride for sportsbook.com and really kickstarted my pro career that, I wasn't expecting to have. I really credit you with that. But that's often how I introduce you. That is it's just one small slice of a pretty big life that you've led. And I don't think you would ever introduce yourself that way. But in the context of my life, that's the people that I'm trying to explain you to, that's often the best way to introduce you. But you've done so much. You're a race organizer still. You run the Turkey Hill Classic still to this day, successful road race. You've run a lot of other races that you've sold or passed on that may or may not exist anymore. But, you live in Lancaster, PA, and you've been really responsible for a lot of growth and success of cycling in that area. You've promoted UCI cyclocross races. You were, what was the actual formal position you had at USA Cycling?
I was the vice chair of the board of trustees at the old USCF.
Yeah, before it was USA Cycling.
Before it was USA Cycling, right? And then when they made that transition, I was one vote away from being an officer at USA Cycling as well. But that's a story to itself. But yeah, no, I was the vice chair at USA Cycling. You're right. I put on a number of races here locally in Lancaster. Ran a number of teams, including Sportsbook, and more recently with your involvement was lucky enough to get involved with the Stellas. And then outside of cycling, I'm the manager of Lancaster Township. I'm the part-time manager of another small town, Marietta Borough, here in Lancaster County, and got a full family of 3 teenage kids, and no, I keep myself pretty busy. Yep.
Yeah, and I was like not sure if we allowed to tell them where you were. I'm glad that you sort of told them.
That's fine. Listen, man, nobody's surprised by anything with me. If there's anything everyone's pretty aware of. I'm a maniac, and it's not a surprise to anyone.
Yeah. Anyone who knows you anyway, but I think some people will be surprised tonight. So we could I
don't want to cut you off, but I just left Marietta tonight. I was down there for, I'm helping them organize a bike race, and I was there from 7 o'clock till 11:30 on Tuesday for the municipal meeting, and I was helping the town run their stuff, and I'm helping the community put together the bike race and fireworks and a concert, over 4th of July weekend. And for the places, listen, Lancaster, despite the aspersions you cast upon the Mid-Atlantic region, Lancaster's a really special place, and it's a place that I moved here because I fell in love with it, and it's a passion of mine. And so I'm, as you are in Dorchester, completely involved in the community here, and want to see them succeed and want to see them flourish, where a lot of other small river towns and small towns have really struggled. So yeah, no, I love living here, and I love getting involved in every aspect of the community, whether it's from cycling or economic development or tourism, et cetera, et cetera. And all those things tie together, and it gives me a unique perspective in that most other bicycle racers or bicycle organizers have a passion for cycling. And they're usually up against folks on the municipal end who their whole job is to be risk adverse, is to make sure bicycle races never get on the roads in their local community. And I'm lucky enough to be able to bridge that gap, to be on both sides of that equation and really see the benefit if you bring a cycling event, a successful cycling event, if you can make it safe, if you can draw in the businesses and the fans and, the spectators and make it a real true community event, that it's the basis for economic development in what this is, a tourism based region,
The pitch that you usually have to do at a town meeting or to town managers, if someone on the inside already understands that, it makes, not only understands that, but is the one advocating, that's half your battle.
Yeah.
I would back up and say, I love the Mid-Atlantic. I do not disparage the Mid-Atlantic. I think it's great. I understand perfectly well why you live down there. I think it's beautiful. I think Lancaster County has tons of charm and tons of reasons why you would want to live there, why you would want to raise a family there. Don't hold me to any jokes I made in 2003 or a decade ago. No, it's great down there, and I know why you're there. You could have left if you wanted to, so you're still there. So,
right.
So we have to explain why, other than us being old friends, why would I have you on the show, or why is it interesting to have you on the show? And I think part of why I want to talk to you is that I do think, first of all, I don't think people know you, and I think they should. I think you're actually very important to cycling, have been very important to cycling, and you still love and care about cycling, and I think are involved in still making it go a certain way without dedicating your entire life to it, like you attempted to at one point and almost ruined everything else in your life.
That's true. That's true.
I mean, that's what happens. You get yourself, you go, you can go for it, and then you're like, holy shit, I've ruined everything because I went for it. And you learned a lot. And I just think you still contribute. But I think the reason why, for instance, I went back to you, when you contacted me about, hey, do you guys need a per diem director here and there? Do you need help? I was psyched to have you help Estella's last year whenever there was an opportunity. And it was very easy for me to go to bat for you, because I think you have a lot of experience, and I think you have a very unique perspective, because you're just on the outside enough to be able to look in and go, guys, you're fucking this up. Here's how it should be going. And you have this other government experience, managing a township is not a joke. Like, that's not like Lancaster County, like where you work, it's, in my opinion, it's serious business. It's just because it's not like a big city doesn't mean it's not lots and lots of people and real life and important issues. So, and I also think you're not as crazy as you pretend to be. And I think, crazy like a fox. It's very entertaining. And I think people will find it very interesting. And I think we've got some stories to tell. So,
okay.
Yeah, let's dive right into it. Like, I was even trying to think, like, how did we meet?
Well,
did we meet on the internet?
Yeah, no, absolutely. So, like, the kind of unique perspective I think we'll talk about tonight is we come from a shared culture. I think that's kind of like the hip hop culture, the beginning of the internet. Probably what I'd consider like the flourishing prime time of bicycle racing domestically and internationally. Like all that stuff, that confluence of late 80s, early 90s led to, I mean, we met with the thing we're not supposed to talk about, right? Like the family, like the the meeting of basically cyclocross promoters and race promoters from New England and the Mid-Atlantic. I think at that point, New England had probably was light years ahead of where the Mid-Atlantic was in terms of cyclocross, and you guys really reached out and helped a number of the riders who were going up there and staying up there for weeks at a time and doing races, kind of get a sense of what they needed to do to raise the level of cyclocross in the area. I think Andrew Albright was somebody, Bill Elliston was somebody that you guys, and a handful of other guys, and I don't mean to leave anybody out of the equation, but
Gunnar
absolutely.
Came up, absolutely. Mike Yozell came up.
Sure, Yozell's a great example of a guy who came up.
Those three guys.
Yeah.
Look, when Gunnar, Yozell, and Fergie came up and lived.
Fergie, great. Yeah, perfect. Yep.
I think that was the Mac New England connection. I think when those guys came up, I mean, we were all friendly, but that really tied us all in together. And the first group of people that we really shared our resources and experience with was, like you and Andrew and other Mid-Atlantic and promoters. And also, I guess you shouldn't leave out,
I know who's right. That other guy. He's going to be so mad. He gets mad about everything.
This is why I was actually nervous about doing a live show.
Right.
Because I do this all the time. I forget like my best friends' names.
Right.
Chris Auer. Chris Auer was originally in New Hampshire. He was connected to us. He and JD were housemates at one point. And so when Auer went to the Mid-Atlantic, he also was bringing some New England knowledge with him. And so there's lots of crossover, which, honestly, like culminated with JD and Meg Billidoo getting married. Like that was the ultimate, like we took the queen from the Mid-Atlantic and married her to the king of New England. And like, that's how the kingdoms were united. But the other thing that happened, and we could spend this is a show unto itself. And I think we should probably tell this story sometime and have a few other people on, but like Andrew Albright and the Monkey Hill race.
Sure.
He's the one who pushed UCI racing. We helped you guys with like the quality of the events that we were putting on and shared our resources. Andrew was the one who said, hey, the Super Cup isn't special. You can do this too. I'm going to prove it, and put on a UCI race essentially to like mock the Super Cup.
No,
and then
that's how he works.
Yeah. Well, it was great. He's like, I can do this. And then he encouraged me and said, hey, look, Adam, you should do this too. Look at how easy it is. And I said, you're right. I'll do that too. And then Andrew did it as a gag, but I mean, not that he wasn't serious, but he did it as a fuck you.
And listen, it was a fuck you is more than it was a gag. That was a hell of a race he put on.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Monkey Hill was as good as, any other race that was going on nationally at that time.
Yep. Absolutely. So, I mean, but so was it fucking around on the internet?
Yeah, no, it was the dialogue involved around you guys starting those races, and Andrew and I were doing things here, not only in cyclocross, but on the road. And then, we started the dialogue with you and John Fry and JD and a bunch of other guys talking about how to increase the quality of our races. I think the big conversation started about how to get photo finish down here in the Mid-Atlantic in an affordable way. Listen, at that point, like being able to race your bike and get into a sprint finish was like 75% of a race. And then 25% of the race was like how well you could argue what place you actually got. Right. Like to be able to go to the official and say, no, the guy in the pink socks was to my left for sure. I beat him. And as long as you could like argue vigorously, you could get fourth place instead of fifth place. And it was tedious, it was exhausting. And people would try all different sorts of things, 35 millimeter cameras, and they had popsicle sticks and all sorts of ridiculous shit. And then I think it was John Fry was the first guy who came up with hooking a TiVo up to a VCR camera with a 1 in 10,000 shutter speed or some nonsense like that. And he rigged together some sort of a system for college racing.
Kind of cracked the code. Yeah. And did it cheaply and affordably and in a low tech way that really worked and was scalable.
And I'll tell you what, that guy, he put together a list for Andrew and I of exactly what you needed, and you could go to Circuit City or wherever the hell you wanted to go, and you could buy all that stuff. And that inspired me to go, listen, we need to have that. And then I started the Pennsylvania Cycling Association. I got all the race promoters. It was as is everything with me, kind of self-serving. I was going to promote the state time trial and a state road race, and I wanted people to come. And there was down here, there was no organization whatsoever. So Andrew and I bought all the equipment for the finish line, and then said to folks, if you want to have access to this equipment, you need to join the Pennsylvania Cycling Association. You need to pay a fee to join. It'll pay for all the equipment, and then we'll have a season-long series. And at the end, I'll hold the road race and the time trial, and that ensured the fact that I'd get like 500 people to each of my races and make profit. But in the end, we have what we have now, which is the Pennsylvania Cycling Association, which has its own, bar series like everybody else and a series of races. And for the last 15 or 20 years has been really successful.
Yeah. So it was founded in like what amounts to essentially racketeering, which doesn't surprise me.
I wouldn't characterize it that way, but I won't shy away from the accusation either.
And that's probably a good lead in, even in talking about sportsbook. Because it sounds funny, but I learned a lot about gambling from you, and my opinion about gambling is informed. Oh, it's hat change time.
I'm going to the. I'm representing a little PA here. Little League World Series, Williamsport, Pennsylvania.
Great, excellent. There's a lot going on in Massachusetts and in Boston in particular right now about casinos and legalizing casinos and the debate, the moral debate and legislative debate about casinos. But I tend to be pro casino and pro gambling largely as a result of the education I feel like I received from you. And I think my position on that might surprise some people, but I really learned a lot about cards, about poker, about online gambling, and basically about the right of adults to spend their recreational money on entertainment that they deem appropriate. You really convinced me of that. And you might have been lying to yourself about it because you were doing a lot of gambling.
No, not at all. I'm surprised. It's a short walk for any sort of liberal from liberal to libertarian is a pretty short walk, right? Like, so you're a guy who was a big advocate for people should be able to free to do whatever they want with their bodies and themselves and be in a free state. And I don't see how that's in any way dissimilar from the sense that you should be able to spend your money and spend your time in any way you want. The arguments against, listen, the onus responsibility is on the state to say why something is bad, not why you should be allowed to do something. And
well, generally in Massachusetts, there's an attitude of, and this is what's going on right now, is protecting people from themselves, which is not particularly, it's not libertarian. It is liberal because a liberal state, we are so getting sidetracked. A liberal state cares about its vulnerable citizens. And so, we have a lot of government here in Massachusetts. And so there's a lot of skepticism about casinos, the negative effect there. But let's bring back around to bike racing.
Well, I'll tell you what, you sent me a note earlier and you said you wanted to talk about the story you always tell about online poker. I have no frame of reference for what that is. So tell me what that story is.
Sure. Well, right. So maybe this is a good a good time to sort of interject with that. So when I'm talking about race tactics with teammates or athletes, or sometimes even describe situations I find myself in where I go from a professional race full of people who know what they're doing and know how to read a race and know how to respond appropriately to a certain set of circumstances, like an experienced chess player would, or an experienced poker player would. And so I read a race a certain way. If I'm in an NCC race, this guy attacks here, this team chases there, and I can see 20 moves ahead because I've been racing bikes for 30 years and I'm an analytical person. And if I have a superpower at this point in my career, it's that the other guys that I'm racing with only see 5 moves ahead. And I see, literally feels like I see 20 moves ahead. I feel like I can predict the future in a way that the people around me can't. And that's a strong advantage.
Absolutely.
Bike racing.
Absolutely.
I come home to a local race and it's like I'm on Krypton
right.
because
you're applying strategies and techniques to people who they just have no idea what you're doing.
Out the window, people are doing dumb shit the whole time. And I'm trying to read the race and people are acting against their own best interests in their tactical choices or their behavior in the race. And so my ability to use my tactical acumen goes out the window because I'm playing at a tactical level down and things aren't, again, people are acting against their own best interests. So the analogy that I use was the experience you had when you started playing more and more online poker with like multiple games at once and games where you weren't controlling the level of the game. And so you were doing really well. You were playing online poker. You were making money playing online poker, playing with other skilled poker players. And then you started playing in these maybe more open games and getting killed. And you were complaining about it because they were like playing asteroids and like slapping the buttons.
That's a great analogy. No, it's absolutely true. And I found myself frustrated. And you know, the natural inclination is to think you're having bad luck. And in the end, I realized if I was going to attribute my success to my skill when I was doing well, I couldn't very well attribute my failure to luck when I wasn't going well. And it caused me to reassess. And in the end, I was like, I'm doing something wrong. And you're right. There is a crossover. I mean, the nice thing about anything that you start to excel at or develop a proficiency at is it has some cross application to anything else you do. And in that case, and I think that's probably, I don't remember that conversation, but now I kind of remember that conversation, and that's right. Like when you move from, and I'll tell you what, you had sent me a link the other day to, I think it was David Millar's coaching service, and I think you sent me something else, the Tom Daniels coaching service, and I don't want to, part of me is I don't want to really delve into the doping thing, and I'm tired. That's a tired conversation, and I think the sport needs to really focus on the positive aspects of what it does. And when you look at guys who are at the very top end of their sport, I don't want to say lowering themselves, but you don't see. You're not going to see Peyton Manning charging $150 an hour to give coaching lessons to a high school quarterback. You know what I mean? But beyond that portion of it is exactly what you're talking about. What the fuck does Tom Danielson have to offer to a local cyclist who's looking to improve his lot? What does David Millar have to offer to a local cyclist improving his lot? The real value, I mean, you can learn what you need to learn in terms of physiology from most books. And anybody who hangs a shingle out as a coach and tells you need to ride more when you're a Cat 5 or a Cat 4, or do some intervals or do some base training or some other periodization is going to get you better by the sheer fact that you're riding. But the value that someone like you brings or your coaches bring is exactly that, is understanding what the tactics of a race are based on the opposition you're facing, based on where you are in a continuum, and preparing you so when you go from one level to the next level, you have the skill set necessary, a progressive skill set necessary. And I guarantee David fucking Millar doesn't have any idea what it's like to be in a Cat 4 crit in fucking, some industrial park somewhere. But that's what matters to people who are largely racing their bikes,
He's selling this like unlock the time trial secrets, and the whole thing did It's very distasteful to me, and similar to what Danielson is doing with his coaching. It's distasteful to me because their experience was ill-gotten. So I think sometimes like pro tour teams have this problem where they want to hire director sportifs or managers, and you want to hire someone with a lot of experience to do that job. Well, the pool of applicants with the experience that you need to do that job consists almost entirely of dirty riders.
Right.
And
well, forget the dirty thing for a second. Like if David Millar stuck a fish hook through his lip and wrapped the fish line around his head and rode a time trial, he'd still fucking crush everybody else in the race, right? So if he wants to give advice that, like, you know what's worked for me is sticking a fish hook in my lip and wrapping the fishing line around my head and riding as hard as I could, that's not advice. I mean, that's not well-earned understanding. And maybe I'm not being clear, but like, so, you know, when before I ever got involved in cycling at a large level, NutraFig used to stay at my house. Those guys used to come and stay with me and race here locally in Philly and Lancaster. And I used to hear stories from them about, like, they came to me a week early one time because they were staying in some house with some lady, like this lady in a Victorian house who was like 60 years old and used to come down and make breakfast for them in her underpants because she was looking to get laid by a bunch of 20-year-old dudes, you know, and those guys just couldn't take it. Like after the 5th day, they realized if nobody fucked this chick, they were going to get thrown out in the side, you know? So they called me up and were like, can we come to your house a week early? Or the stories that we'll tell at some point here about, like, you know, all the guys getting in the van and going out to New Mexico and staying at Marco Rulo, a.k.a. Rod Hudson's house, you know? Like, if somebody's looking to make that leap from a local Cat 2 to a professional cyclist, they're going to have to endure shit that, like, Tom Danielson and David Millar don't even have a sense existed, you know? The idea of having to exist from race to race, or sleep on people's floors, or manage. All right, I know I'm all over the place, but just bear with me. Josh Beck was one of the most talented cyclists, and Josh Beck, for anyone who doesn't know, anyone listening in, is a guy who raced for Sportsbook. He was a world-class triathlete. He made the transition very easily over to bicycle racing, and had a tremendous engine and just a good sense for racing. So
Andy he's a sweetheart.
Unbelievable guy. Just a good human being, right?
Such a great guy.
You know, and I'll compare him directly to Scott Z, who I think probably most people listen and know, and who had a great career and a really long, really clean, really, you know, I think prolific career with Kelly Benefits and became Optimum, et cetera, et cetera. The difference between these two.
And he's also very well liked. I mean, he's also a great guy.
Absolutely. But the difference between those two guys is one guy had the ability to get in a van and drive around and sleep on somebody's floor and deal with, you know, professional cycling at a domestic level is, you know, every bit as much being able to survive your environment as it is being able to turn the pedals. You know, at some point, everybody else in the race has the same, you know, aerobic capacity or the same, you know, capacity to do well. There's definitely, you know, in that bell curve of cycling, those guys are all grouped in the same area, but not everybody can sustain that. And Josh, you know, for all his qualities, and he's a good man and a good person, he's, you know, he called me up from Redlands and Sea Otter and said, I can't do this anymore. You know, we took him to Ireland and he really flourished there, but he came back and he said, I don't want to travel around. I don't want to live out of a suitcase. I don't want to live this kind of environment, you know, and
to his credit though, for like recognizing that and not pretending to be, he didn't crack in a sense. He identified it and said, oh, this isn't for me. And then had a successful career doing those Powerman races after that.
And marathon running and training. Like, and, you know, that guy was always going to do well and be happy. And this is not meant
be happy. That's the important part. Yeah. And
this is not meant as a criticism of him. It's saying that's what I think if you're seeking a coaching service, if you're seeking a mentor, if you're looking for somebody to run your team, I think there's value, and this isn't meant, and I'm not going to kiss your ass. This isn't meant to kiss your ass, but I mean, the value is really in finding somebody who's been there, who's suffered through that, who can say, these are the mistakes I've made, or these are the avenues you want to go. These are the strategies you want to employ to be successful. I think I have a unique perspective. I did this. I was exposed to the sport very young, and then went away from it, and then came back to it when you met me in the early 2000s, and then went completely away from the sport for 10 years, and had the pleasure of being back with Stella's last year and seeing what was the same and what was different, And one of the things about that team was the influence that you brought, and making guys prepared for what to expect and not expect, what to be able to do and not to do, what to be able to, and even for the management, what to be able to provide the riders and not provide the riders to make them successful. And when you look at what that team did on the budget they have is really, really, I mean, I was really proud of what we did at Sportsbook. We did what we did with nothing, with no money whatsoever. And I take a lot of pride in that. But it was neat to come full circle and come back to Estella's, which is elevated a full level up. But still, what they achieved with the money they had and what they provided the riders was pretty amazing, and in a large part a testament to what you brought to that program. So,
yeah, thank you. Yeah, I appreciate that you recognized my hand in that. And part of why I was a good fit there was because Andrew Fry is from that same era and understood that get in the van mentality and knew that I could bring that to the team. He valued that in me, whereas not every director did. Eric Saunders, part of why I was at Sportsbook for as long as I was is because Saunders, Pat Raines, Jamie Bennett, they hired me for that moxie, for that get in the van, survivor mentality. There's a criticism of that says you'll only get so far on that mentality, that you're not, it will limit your success. And you see how maybe Sportsbook changed after I left as a result of the influences changing. But also the longevity went out the window too. It flew real high, too high. I mean, there's no team anymore, is there?
Oh, you're talking about, you said Sportsbook. I think you mean Smart Stop.
Oh, yeah, I meant Smart Stop. Sorry. Yeah, I did. Yeah. Sorry. Yeah. No, I was talking about the changes at Smart Stop after I left, which is not something I necessarily want to get into. Sure. But to bring it back around to your point, I've often said that I think the best mentors, the best teachers, the best coaches are not always the most talented. They're the ones that have to solve the puzzle, crack the code, who don't. The talented athletes don't always know how they do what they do. They train and they pedal hard and they get better and they have big hammers, and so every problem is a nail. I think my success as a coach, or my skills as a coach, were honed in the lack of ability. I can't just pedal. I can't just fix mistakes by pedaling harder. I had to think about what was happening and really learn the sport. And I think
that's the point I'm trying to make. Right. And you know what? It's funny. Other sports have come to that realization. If you take a look, I mean, the NBA is not the greatest sporting product there is, but if you take a look at the NBA, their most successful coaches they're the six men off the bench. They're the guy who hustled and worked hard and understood the game and can fill any role. I think Major League Baseball, by and large, is the utility player, who understands the totality of the game and how to work for it. Brings more value from a coaching position. I think cycling largely misses that at its highest level. They just take the guy who was the most successful and the guy who needs a job, and they put him in the seat. But whatever. No, I'm with you completely. That if I was seeking advice, it would be from the guy who, as you said, who doesn't look at everything as a nail, and he has the same hammer that works.
Yeah, and so I really do. I appreciate. I'm sorry, I'm trying to adjust my light here. I appreciate that you identified that, even when I wasn't even on that trip, and you saw the hand I had or the influence I'd had on the guys. And I've said this 100 times already, but I'll say it again. I said it on the last trip. I had a really great experience at Estella's last year. I love the guys in the team. I like the management. Team wasn't perfect. No teams are, but it was a positive environment. Everybody worked hard. People were friends with each other. it was really a great place to finish.
And listen, I saw everybody at the end of July, which for most teams is a death knell. It's like it's the worst it's ever going to be, and I had a really positive experience. And I worked with them in July and again in September, and everybody was really positive. It was good seeing.
Yeah, good. It's hard to watch from the outside right now. Like I wish I was there with the guys. Like it still feels like my team. I still talk to Andrew and I kind of watch what they're doing and how they're doing, and I still feel very involved with the team and invested in the success there. So,
I'm hopefully going to do some work with them this year.
Good.
Yeah, we'll see how they go. They had a little bit of a tough time at Redlands, and I know a couple guys are hurt. I know Jake and a couple of the British riders are living locally. I hope to connect with them, but we'll see. We'll see how Gila goes.
Gila with a G.
Yes.
Let's go. I want to talk about Sportsbook because I feel like there's it was a very important year in my life, and it's the year that we became friends. Even if that year wasn't perfect either, I did learn a lot that year about myself, about bike racing, about friends and friendship and like who would stick around, I made friends for life on that team. And I think that happens in bike racing. It doesn't happen every year. It doesn't happen with every teammate, but with the exception of Marco Rulo,
right.
I'm in touch with everybody. Yeah. I'm still in touch with everybody team. Even Josh, who we're still friendly, and I could reach out to him if I was passing through. We don't talk just because our lives don't overlap. I could still call him, hey, I'm in a jam. Call him in the middle of the night. He'd be there. Is that kind of guy. Same thing with Svatek. I don't talk to Svatek that often.
It's like the friends you meet freshman year of college. It's
Yeah. I could show up on his doorstep. I could show up his doorstep homeless and he'd be like, yeah, come on.
Well, I mean, mostly everybody with Svatek, I think that's probably true. He'd let you in. He just wouldn't let you in the front door.
Well, you'd have to take care of the horses or something. He'd make you sleep in the bar.
Right.
Now. But Sportsbook was special because for people who don't remember, the year was 2003. I had already given up on pro bike racing. I had pursued it for a decade. I couldn't figure out why all my peers had made all these dramatic breakthroughs that sort of weren't happening to me. I couldn't figure out what was wrong with me and why I wasn't making that breakthrough. And I figured it out eventually. But at the time, I still was pretty naive about things and just thought, hey, I'm just not good enough. All these guys are breaking through and I'm not. And I finished school and I got married and I got a job. And so I spent, 4 years racing for fun and then started coaching and trying to be a husband and all that. And the other struggle in the 90s was there weren't that many teams. In the years that I was winning races and really performing at a high level, there was no place to go. There were 2 pro teams in America. There was LA Sheriffs and Coors Light for a while. Then SAP came into play, but there weren't 10 pro teams. There weren't a lot of jobs. The job market was very narrow. And there was also no European pipeline. You couldn't just, there was no under 23 category. You didn't just, there was just no place to go except ride criteriums and circles and make money. And then when Sportsbook came around, the economy was getting better. Pro cycling was growing. And that year, I think of Sportsbook, there were like 12 registered teams. Yeah, looks good. Yeah. Sportsbook was literally like one of 12 pro teams that year. And so the reason why I ended up with a job, that $2,000, that contract was that.
And you got to keep your bikes.
Yeah, right. No, which is valuable. That was worth more than my contract. And I liked those bikes. Those Olmos were great. I didn't come up to the sport. The sport came down to me. And because they were all of a sudden, if there's 12 or 13 pro teams instead of 2 or 3, then you got to keep, there's a job market. And finally the job market made it down to the level of, I was a 30-year-old, never was, I don't know what you want to call me, like almost was, like unfulfilled potential for sure.
Listen, you touched on this last week in your podcast, which I listened to. The 80s was a different world. Like, people who grew up in the Lance Armstrong era have no sense of what the 80s were for, like, American cycling. Like, you could do a Cat 4 crit every weekend with $1,000 prizes.
All the local races had one or $2,000. Oh,
absolutely, from every level, like Cat 4, Cat 3. You could race as an amateur cyclist and make your way and pay your bills in the 80s in a way that was, like, it was weirdly profitable, especially on the crit scene. And on the highest levels, you had wheat thins. You know, beyond that, like, it started with the Mayor's Cup Series and the NCL. And if you could race crits, you could make a living as an amateur cyclist. And if you were an up-and-coming cyclist, you could buy a bike for $700 and you could race every weekend for $1,000 prize list for $20 or $25, no matter where you were in the pecking order, you know? And at the same time that was going on, you had, like, the Tour de Trump coming up, and Team 711 was going over to Europe, and Greg LeMond was winning everything. And even, like, Andy Bishop was, like, a collegiate cyclist who the next year was on PDM racing in the Tour de France. And you were like, right. Oh, well, if you were like a cyclist starting out, you were like, fuck, man, I'm going to buy a bike. I'm going to get this index shifting, and I'm going to ride around in circles. And in 2 years, I'll be in the Tour de France. It was like a period of like, what I imagine, like, stockbrokers would be like when you went through this big Wall Street boom. It just seemed like the possibilities were endless, and everything was good and everything was wonderful and profitable, you know? And I think that's where you came up with. I mean, that's where you came up in, that environment where
I came up. Yeah, that was the generation before me.
You were like probably 15, 16, 17, 18 coming up when the guys 5 years older than you were on AMC Bola or AME Bola or whatever it was, and the NCL was coming up, and you could get a contract and get flown to San Antonio and get to race around and get all your expenses paid. And it was kind of like,
and I did.
Everyone thought that was never going to end, and then the 90s hit, and all of a sudden, nothing. There was no opportunity.
Right.
All the when you think about it, it wasn't just Philly. It was Philly, Pittsburgh, Lancaster, Trenton, the West Virginia Tour, all the NCL races, all that stuff was going on all at once. And everybody who was anybody was getting a contract and getting fully paid and racing for good prize lists. And then all at once, all of that went away. And that was like 1990.
Yeah. And it went away. Yeah, it went away like 90. In 96, I won the first NRC road race of the season in Ocala, Florida. I was 24. 80-mile road race in Florida the week before Redlands. I was leading the NRC as a 24-year-old. Like, and then what happened? And then I raced. And then the team. I was on Scott Bykyle then, but
sure,
we were supposed to turn pro. We didn't turn pro. Like, money wasn't coming. Like, I ran out of money. I had to go home. I ended up signing to Breakaway Courier Systems as an amateur, but, like, they gave me a $5,000 contract.
Right. Which was great. I mean, still.
So I was a journeyman. Oh, my God.
Right.
Hey, if I wanted to keep racing, they were like, come down to New York City. We'll still give you the contract with $5,000 for you. We don't have a bike for you.
Oop. I can hear you, but I can't see, which is kind of like a little bit better. No offense.
Well, maybe it's your slow internet on your end, because nothing's changed.
I got 3 teenage kids here, so hang on. I'm just going to pull these out for 1 second. I'll be right back.
Yeah, I should have kept the recording on while you were yelling at your kids.
Well, got to command respect. No, that's what it was. I got 3 teenage kids, and they're all streaming shit. So this is the Estella's professional cycling team hat that I wear with great pride.
Oh, excellent. There were people in the comments that said It said, I guess it was showing up as poor internet signal for me, but it didn't bump me. So yeah, we'll see. I mean, I'm still learning how to use Blab. It's only our second show. People are mad that you stopped telling the story. By the way, I don't have my tongue pierced anymore. There was no jewelry in my mouth. You only you only chip your teeth enough times before you realize you need to, maybe it's the right piercing.
Well, it had been a half season long buildup of Svatek wanting to choke you, which came to a head in my kitchen and sent my wife scrambling upstairs.
It's so funny because, like, I mean, it makes sense. Like, that was 15 years ago. Like, it almost sounds like I don't even know those people, if you know what I mean. I'm in so many ways I'm the same person, but in so many ways I'm different.
You're totally different. Everybody else is the same.
Oh, really?
Yeah, no, everyone else is pretty much the same. You kind of grew up a little bit, yeah. And I felt really bad for you that day because I really thought Svatek was going to kill you. Until I went upstairs and found all the bloody sheets that you shoved under my daughter's bed, and then,
I knew there was no way we weren't going to tell the bloody sheet story today. Like, I was fully prepared for that. And there was no way for me to include it in, like, the pre-podcast preview notes because it was, I mean, it's actually not that funny to talk about the fact that somehow I was blamed for bloody sheets that were hidden under your young daughter's bed. Like, that's not actually funny. No. Except, of course, it was hilarious.
Really? It's been 18 years and I'm still not finding the humor in it. But go ahead. Explain to me.
I don't have an explanation. I just don't know how I blamed for it. Like, had I crashed or something? Like, why would I?
You were the only one who
hide.
You were the only one who crashed. You were the only one bleeding. And you were the only one who gathered up the sheets and hid them underneath my daughter's bed.
Someone else gathered them up and hid them. Why would I do that? Like, that makes no sense. Why wouldn't I just go, I got to wash the sheets? Like, there's nothing to hide. There was no reason for me to be like, oh, I bled on the sheets. Like, I crashed. Of course I bled on the
what makes you so weird.
The things you were willing to believe.
All right, listen,
the things you were willing.
Listen. What we don't need to subject a bunch of other people to this.
Someone hid some bloody sheets under your.
Listen, I think maybe 9/11 was an inside job, but you're gonna have a hard time making me believe that someone else hid your bloody sheets under my bed.
I just think there's a misunderstanding in here somewhere. I definitely bled on the sheets. I don't remember hiding.
Was it the Svatek in the grassy knoll? Is that what you're saying?
I can't explain it. I don't have an answer for it.
Fair enough. I'm not going to press you on it.
Yeah. Like Jake said, everybody heard you yelling at your kids, so who are they going to believe?
That was the nicest I've been to them in a month. They deserve it.
I forgot about. So
fuck, Jake should be scared. Hey, Jake, are you on here?
Yeah, he's leaving comments. You can't see.
Well, you know what? Fuck you. You're lucky I didn't yell at you.
Well, there's still time. Don't make Jake cry. No, let's go back to Sportsbook for a second. So, Sportsbook was really great for me, Bill. And yes, we only got paid $2,000, but like, you took us to Mexico. You took us to Ireland. Yeah. I had the best result of my career in Ireland. And I mean, I should tell the story about like you coming home drunk after the first stage in Mexico and waking us all up. If you're going to tell the bloody sheet story,
the first stage, I come home every night drunk.
Yeah, but I didn't know that that's how it was going to be. So Bill takes us first race of the year for the team. This is a story unto itself. Okay. It's 9:50. We got 10 minutes left if we're going to keep it to an hour.
Fuck that.
We're doing the Vuelta Sonora. Oh, no, Hermosillo. Vuelta Hermosillo. Mm-hmm. We all go to Tucson for like a week to train, and then we go to this stage race in Mexico that none of us have ever been to. And I know it's probably not a common, like not everybody's raced in Mexico, but racing in Mexico just south of Tucson is pretty common. There's a lot of races down there. People go down and do those races. Those races are bananas. Like, it's crazy. It's like Mexican stage racing. Unfortunately, it's as crazy as all of the like stereotypes you've heard. Like
every day.
That's a good on highways, on like not closed roads. Right. Like if you just ran a race, no part. On like Yeah. And no marshals,
No.
open road. Yeah, that's what it's like. So
literally cannonballs buried in the middle of the road, right? Where'd you go, motherfucker?
Oh, I lost you for a second there, but you're back. I don't know if it was me or you.
Right.
But so we get there. It's kind of a shit show. And the shit show starts in Tucson. Like, we're meeting a man in a gas station parking lot next to the airport who's going to drive us over the border. Like,
in a white rapist van who doesn't speak English.
Well, that shuttle, obviously I've spent years and years in Tucson since then. That shuttle is actually like a legit thing and it's a business, but we didn't know that at the time. It was just some dude in a van came to pick us up and took us over the border. And we sat there for a long time before he came for us. Like, who knew where he was taking us? Turned out he was taking us to the race. The race was great. It was a good race. It was a lot of fun.
We get stopped by dudes with machine guns on the way down.
Oh, I don't remember that. I forgot.
Oh, yeah,
we had to stop at the
Listen, I don't even know all you guys. You guys were down there. I flew down, picked you up. We got in the van. We're driving, and we're joking around the whole time. We passed through U.S. Customs, and then we drive like another 5 miles down the road, and there's a sign that we got to pull over, and it's Mexican Customs. Mexican Customs is a whole fucking different deal. It's a very serious deal, and everyone there is standing there with a machine gun. And you guys are nervously joking around. Now, I don't even know you guys. And I'm like, I mean, I know you a little bit, but I don't know anybody else. And I'm like, listen, nobody make a fucking joke. Nobody say a word. And I get out of the van and the guy wants our papers. And like half the dudes on our team have like, they don't have like papers. They don't have passports. They got like their college fucking ID and
yeah. Like, I have, like, my septum pierced and, like, pink hair.
And I'm like, we're going to get fucking shot and raped in the Mexican border, and not in that order. So I get out of the car, and the guy's like, open up the back of the trunk. And I open it up, and the entire trunk of the van is filled with everybody's race bag. And he goes, take all of it out. And I go, all of it? And he goes, all of it. And he's literally wearing a machine gun. And I'm like, okay. And I take the first bag out, and then I go to take the second bag out, and the whole time I'm praying, like, I don't need you to hop out of the front seat and say, where's your search warrant? Because we're all going to get machine gunned and left in the desert. Anyway, I get the second bag out, and he goes, open the first bag. And I'm like, fine. And I open up the first bag, and he's not even looking what's in the bag. He just wants to see if I'm going to react like in any sort of negative way or be scared or deny him access. And I open up the bag, and he goes, zip it up and get out of here. And I fucking threw all that shit in the back of the van, and we split.
Yeah. Well, so we get to this race, and for me, I'm like, I am finally a pro. Like, and the thing, listen, I know, but I was, in my mind, I was finally a pro. And I know, right? We were playing in pro cycling, but we thought we were doing something professional.
We're at an international race. All expenses paid.
I should back up for a second and say, yeah. Well, the thing that was interesting about the team is, and I was the oldest guy on the team. At my racing age was 31 that year. Maybe Svatek is my age, but I think he was a year or two younger than me. I was the oldest and most experienced guy on the team, and you had hired me as the captain of the team, but I was also a neo-pro, and that was interesting. And I remember us having a little conflict. This is a quick aside, because I had gotten used to being like rider manager for these other teams that I was on, and I thought that was what you were asking me to come in and do. And I remember like taking over the meeting at dinner because I thought that was what I was supposed to do. And then I remember you telling me later, like, this is my fucking team. I'm getting ready to talk. And then you step in and start running my show for me. And I was like, oh, I thought that was why I was here. So little stuff like that. Took us a while to sort out. But the thing that I think was our first like real conflict though was like, I'm taking this so seriously, and we're there for the first night in the hotel, and we're racing the next day, and we get woken up at like, I don't know, 1 a.m.
That's being generous.
Because because
Me and Mike
you're
Jones.
like away from you were away from your family, and you needed to let off some steam.
Mm-hmm.
I thought we were there to race bikes.
We were.
You went to the bars, you went to the.
You were there to race.
You went to the. Yeah, and you were there to go to the strip club in Hermosillo, and I didn't know that. I was like, I can't believe my fucking director woke me up the night before my first professional bike race. I was so mad at you. It's such an amazing story. Now I'm so glad that you did that. Like,
first of
now
all,
I wouldn't change it.
I just want to be clear. There was a show at the hotel we were staying at for prospective brides. It was a brides to be wedding show with like wedding dresses and caterers and shit like that. There was no strip club involved. There might as well have been, but I want to class it up a bit by saying I was fraternizing with prospective brides to be, which is a whole different story.
Man, I remember strip club, but well, I don't know. Well, so we did pretty well in that race.
We did,
if I recall.
We did great.
It was like, yeah, and then I mean, for the money that you had and the experience that the guys had, you know, you took us to the Tour of Ireland. It was a huge opportunity, huge experience. We still didn't know what we were doing. I remember on that first stage, just attacking the shit out of that race.
Let me talk. Can I talk about that a little bit? Because we got there, and you know, Hermosillo was cool, but I think after we were there for a day or two, everyone realized it was the equivalent of a local race. It was, you know, it was cool, and it was a really good experience to get out of the country. And then we went and did Redlands, and you guys did Sea Otter, and then you know, had come back and done some local racing. But the first, I think, for me, when you say that, you know, we're a real pro team, the first time I got that sense was when we went to Ireland. That was a big UCI race. There were a bunch of international teams there. There were some professional teams there. We were a little bit over our heads in terms of the support we had and the money we had and the riders we had. But we were there. And I remember the first stage, I said, I want us to go for the sprint jersey. And I remember getting some pushback from you and from Matt and from some of the guys saying, you know, we're going to be here for like 8 days. This is the longest stage race we ever did. Let's kind of see where we are in the pecking order of things. And I was pretty insistent. I'm like, no, I want you guys to attack. Are you still there, Adam?
Yeah, I'm here.
Okay, I can't see you, but
my video gone?
No, but it was at that point it was a pretty big deal to me and I remember being really, really insistent. Like, no, I want you guys. The first sprint point is whatever at 50K, and I want you to go for it, and I want you to try to win the sprint jersey, and I want us to race aggressively that day. And one of the things I really appreciated was I could tell that you guys weren't sold on the idea, but I'd earned enough trust that you had committed to the idea. And you guys fucking raced like maniacs that day. Like, we just from kilometer zero, just attacked relentlessly. And then we're in every sprint and we're right there at the finish at the end. And the reason I did that and you know, there was a motive to my madness there was I wanted you to get a sense that you belonged. I didn't want you to go into that race and think that you were in over your head or that you didn't belong. And I think you had earned the right to be there. And I wanted you guys to race like you belonged. And I want everybody else to have your attention and respect. And you guys earned it that day. You really, really did. And I think by the time we got to stage 8, you believed in yourselves, and we had raced really well as a team. And I think everybody else in the race had that sort of respect for who you were and what you were doing.
I think we were so confused that day because even though we were being really aggressive and we were attacking constantly, and we were the only ones who were, and we couldn't figure out why everybody would cover our moves and chase us down, but then nobody wanted to race. And it was because everybody else was racing for an 8-day stage race and we were taking it one day at a time. And so, yeah, you're right. It was, we realized that day that we were as good as anyone else in the race.
Right.
But we had to over race to sort of find that out. Yeah. And that, you know, we had a lot of problems over the week with crashes and
I'm going to say we had one problem. I mean, after the second day, we had two guys in the big break that went away and got 6 minutes. And Svatek and Josh Beck were both in the lead group and both racing well. And then the third day, we had a big crash, like 15K in. I mean, absent of that.
Yeah. Well, it's funny because there were three of us in that group at first. I don't know if you remember
I violated a lot of UCI and motor vehicle regulations to get you guys back in the group that day.
I was also in that group when it first split, and then it stopped raining.
Are you talking about day 2 or day 3?
Day 2.
Okay.
And I took all my stuff off and put it in the van, put it in the car, and then the group split in, and Josh and Matt made the split, and I didn't. And then the car went up with them, and then it started raining, pouring.
Oh, is that the day you were in the shower?
And that's how those guys got the 6 minutes. I was in the next, I was in the next group, and and then I got sick. Then I got sick after that. The third day was when I got sick, and spent a couple of days holding on to the car.
Well, the third day, we did some things that. For anybody who doesn't know, so what happened was, listen, I'm going to indulge myself in this story for your sake and my sake, and everyone else can tune out if they don't care. But stage 3, we're 15K or 20K into the race, and there's a huge pile up, 40 or 50 riders. Everybody's scrambling to find the race should have been the race should have been neutralized. It was at a time that was insignificant in the race. It was probably a 90-mile stage, would you say? And it didn't really matter. That, I mean, when the crash occurred, but there were just so many riders down that you couldn't get enough equipment onto the riders to get them going. By the time we got everyone going, I think you and Josh got back into it. Our team was all together. Everybody crashed. And by the time we got Svatek going, we were 3 or 4 minutes behind. And then
someone had flatted, though, and I had stopped for them. Like, maybe I stopped for Svatek because I was thinking, I haven't eaten in 24 hours. I'm going to get dropped anyway. I should help Svatek. Right. And so I waited, thinking I could help him chase back.
The thing I remember is we stopped in front of a school, an elementary school. And the elementary school had let all the kids from the school out of the school to come by the roadside and cheer for the race. And everyone else had gone by. But Svatek, who looks like a fucking Viking, is standing on the side of the road. And we're trying to fix his bike, and we had to pull another bike off and switch out his seat post and his pedals and the whole deal. And the kids are screaming, and it's complete pandemonium. And Svatek's saying, "Fuck this! Let me in the car. I'm done. Like, this is a waste of time." And I'm like, "No, you're getting back in this fucking race. You get 5 more." If you remember, Ryan DeWald quit the second day. After I told him not to fucking quit, he quit anyway. So it was me and our driver and DeWald in the car, and there was literally no more room in the car. So I said to Svatek, "You can't quit. There's no more room in the car. You have to fucking ride another 70 miles no matter what happens." So he got on his bike and started riding behind us, and we were motor pacing him. And then I said, "Fuck it, just grab the luggage rack." And we started driving like 60 miles an hour with him hanging onto the luggage rack until we caught your group. And then you guys got behind the car, and we started motor pacing until we dropped everybody else but you guys. And then you guys grabbed on a luggage rack.
You're skipping this. It's slightly out of order what's happening there. It was Svatek and someone else. There were 2 guys on the bumper. Maybe it was Josh. I don't remember. But Svatek had flatted first, and I waited for him. And then he dropped me on the way back to the field. And then the crash happened. But I was already off the back of the field and out of the caravan. Yes. I rode by you while you guys were on the side of the road trying to get back in the field. But I literally hadn't eaten for 24 hours. I had food poisoning. So I dangle in the caravan for an hour before I finally just let go. And a half an hour later, I'm alone. I'm just riding by myself out of the caravan. There's no group behind me.
10 minutes behind you.
Yes, completely out of the caravan. You appear with 2 guys on your bumper. Svatek and someone else, and I can't remember who it is. There was no you caught me by myself. Those guys were motor pacing.
Right.
And there was no room for me to get on the back of the car. Like, I couldn't motor pace because there were already two guys there. So I held on to the rack, not Svatek. And we were, I don't know how long you had been motor pacing them, but we were well behind the last group on the road. And all you did was bring us up to whatever the last shit group of let me take that back. The Conti riders are all hard as nails. I don't even mean for a second to suggest that was a shit group, because those guys were unbelievable.
Right.
But those guys motor paced after the crash just back up into the caravan, but it took an hour to do it.
We motor paced for an hour. You guys took turns.
And I held on.
Yeah. You would come back
and I held
someone else
on
would hold on. And there was
minutes.
just enough. No, we chased for a long time.
And so eventually you got us back to the caravan. And by the time we got there, the race was over.
Race was
like
gone.
the fifth group on the road.
That's when we lost the race.
And we just rode in with the last group on the road. So it's not like
you didn't get an unfair advantage. It kept you in the race.
Well, that's how we rationalized it at the time. Yes.
Sure.
It's at this point in my life, I consider that cheating. Like, I would not do that now.
Cheating
at the time.
Cheating is a strong term.
It's funny because it has it's analogous to doping in some ways, because my mentality at the time was, this is European stage racing. You do what you have to get back into the caravan. Holding onto the car was normal. Like I didn't question it. It wasn't even like a moral quandary for me. It was like, I was being a pro and a tough guy by holding onto the car to get back into the race so I could live to fight another day. Like, it was this honorable thing that I did. That's the same rationalization people use for doping.
Oh, come on.
That's
all right. I can't make that leap, but
I don't hold on to cars,
All right.
But I did then. So, and it got me back into the race. And then the next day I started eating again. And then I got another top 10 and then another top 10. And then I won the last stage. And it was the best result of my career.
It was awesome.
I mean,
it was awesome.
Awesome. Yeah. Yeah. I'm glad that I held onto the car, honestly. At this point, it's an experience. It's a tale. I won the last stage of an international.
You absolutely can't. You can't. I'll be disappointed if you walk away from that equating that effort and that experience to anything related to cheating or doping or anything else. Now, I'll tell you this much: nobody else who participated in that race felt that way about the result. And in the end, you would have made the time cut anyway.
Perhaps, but that's also what people say about doping.
Yeah, whatever. And I get it. I get it. It's qualified. You hung on to a car while I drove 50 miles an hour. I can't. It's hard for me to.
It wasn't easy. That wasn't easy. That was actually hard. I think I would think of it. So things evolve.
Okay.
Morality evolves, and I would consider this an area of evolving morality. And at that point in time, my understanding of the sport, what was and wasn't okay, holding onto the car when you have food poisoning.
All right, we should move on from the topic. Where'd you go?
Poisoning, and I shouldn't race. That's how my morality has evolved since then. So
okay, I lost it for a minute there. But okay, let's move on. Let's go.
We should start wrapping it up. It's 10:10.
Are you bored?
Got an hour
I like
10.
talking to you.
Well, we could just meet at the bar, but it's a podcast, and no one wants to listen more than an hour. Yeah, maybe we'll do another show, Bill. We got a lot of stories to tell. We have not talked about Ron Hudson at all, and I think is that a show unto itself?
I don't think so. I don't think there's a lot. I think for us, there's a lot to talk about. For the general public, I'm not sure what there is to say. I think there's a lot to talk about. I think Eustace is a hell of a lot more interesting to talk about than Ron Hudson. I think about the state of cycling today domestically. I think the stuff that
coming from Lancaster. Coming from Lancaster, I would like to hear, we could talk about Landis, and like you have a whole perspective on Landis, watching him grow up racing, coming from Lancaster County, I think.
Yeah.
Let's close. I would like to close out by hearing your opinion of the current state of affairs. I mean, we could talk about disc brakes. We could talk about the current state of affairs of pro cycling from your perspective. Like, let's make that our last topic. Like, what do you think is pro cycling in America healthy right now? Are we pointing in the right direction?
No,
what do you see?
The domestic cycling? No, yeah. It's awful. I read what Vaughters wrote this week in his assessment of what makes good. Listen, all right, we're gonna get into this. I'm pouring myself another glass of wine. So the deal with cycling is this. Cycling as entertainment has to take one of a couple of forms. The reason, in my opinion, the reason that Paris-Roubaix is so successful, or even the reason that Flanders or any of the other major World Cup monuments is successful is you build a storyline. Like I mean, let's just talk about Paris-Roubaix for a second. You know where the pave is. So you know that you're going to have the riders roll out. There's the preamble to the story is who the riders are and what their ambitions are and whatever sort of John Tesh-esque sort of storyline you can create. But the course itself is a plot unto itself. You know you're going to get to the Ehrenberg Forest. You know you're going to have other sections of pave which punctuate the action. And that creates the drama and the intrigue and the understanding of the viewing public. So if cycling wants to present itself, and I think Tour de France does a good job of that as well. You get the first week, which is the week for the sprinters, and then you get a week for the climbers, and then you get a time trial, and then you narrow the field down to 2 or 3 guys, and the last week has a couple of key stages where people can wrap their head around the fact that this is what I should be paying attention to. If cycling is going to be popular in the U.S. in terms of a road venue, it needs to create and emphasize events that have that sort of easily understood, this is what you should pay attention to and when, combined with the storylines of here's who the characters are. That's a lot to ask.
I think that's what so this is why I think the NCC, separate from the NRC, despite the fact that it wasn't being supported by all the pro teams, was actually successful. For anyone who was paying attention to that, there were great markets across the country. There was good prize money. There was live feeds most of the time, and that could have been improved. There wasn't live television, and that's what the medalist races have that, the criteriums don't. You can watch the medalist races in 250 countries instead of a webcast. It was live TV. But it had a storyline. It had characters. It had personalities. And it had a story arc that you could follow throughout the season. And I think that had a ton of potential. Right. And if it was marketed correctly, I don't know if it's not that I blame USA Cycling for that, but, people are... I know I asked you for your opinion and now I'm giving you mine, which is typical, but it could have been supported better by the teams if they weren't, in my opinion, not just distracted, but drained by their attempt to get into the medalist races. When all of your resources have to go into
completely. And
racing these 4 races.
This confluence, this joining of the NCC and the NRC, which everyone's looking at as a good thing, I think is a terrible thing. I think it's only occurred because the NCC has gotten so good that the NRC wants to co-opt it, and it's bullshit.
That's what I think.
It's the NCC was doing exactly what needs to be done for cycling.
And I think no one cared and was supporting the NRC anymore. But I think what you're going to see, though, is now they're both irrelevant because everyone's still focused on the medalist races. Like, Rally went to Europe like they always do. UHC is going to Europe like they always do. No one's, Redlands is a great race, but are people supporting the NRC races because of the NRC or because the individual events are worth going to? And that's why people go to Redlands. I don't always understand why people go to Gila from a marketing standpoint. I don't think people go to Gila for exposure. They go to Gila for training, and they go to Gila to post results that prove they deserve to be in the medalist races. But when you see the finish lines at Gila, there's 2 pieces of orange fence and a tumbleweed. That's shitty marketing. Like, those pictures are horrible. They look terrible. And when there's 10 deep at the finish line of Athens Twilight, to me, that looks like a better marketing effort. But for some reason, we value the 1 piece of orange fence at the top of the climb in Gila. I don't know what do we value it for? Why do we value that? I don't know. It doesn't have marketing value from my perspective. It looks terrible. We know it's hard. We know gets a worthy winner. It's impressive. It's quality racing, but it's not a spectacle.
Well, because you have people running, you have people involved in running the sport. You have a complete disconnect on both ends. You have people running and marketing the sport on the upper end. Listen, when I was at the USCF, we had Evan Call, who I don't think he's ever ridden a bike in his life since he was 8 years old, right? He had no sense of what the sport was all about in any way. And he's the epitome of like the awfulness of USA cycling, on one end of the spectrum. And on the other end of the spectrum, you have people who were involved in cycling because they are participants and they love the sport. They want to participate, but they don't have any sense of the business end and the marketing end of the sport. I think Gerard, and I'm going to fuck up his name because that's what I do, right?
No, Gerard Bisseglia.
Yeah, he got it.
Great.
He got it.
Yeah.
And the biggest downfall, the saddest thing I have about the growth of the sport at that time was he was chased off, and he was the guy who understood the sport enough to take it to the level of a major sport in this country, and he was chased off. And honestly,
Derek
Bouchard Hall is the guy that I have the greatest hope. He's the guy that I hope. He's one of the reasons that I'm really invested in the sport again in a real way. Yeah. He's a guy who came from where we are. He understands the sport not only from a participant level, but from a business level. And I think he can bridge that gap in a way that makes all the difference in the world. So I thought when the NRC and the NCC merged together, I thought it was an awful idea until I knew that he was at the helm. And I'm willing to give him a year or two to kind of make his bones to prove that he's worthy of the position he's been given. And I think he is. I mean, I think he has the skills necessary to succeed.
I reacted the same way. I think it's a bad idea. But when I heard that Derek was pushing for it, I said, okay, I'll let it play out. Because I don't just it's not blind faith that I have in Derek. He's earned our trust and our faith. And I think he is Gerard with Olympic experience. He's Gerard with professional experience. Gerard wasn't a bike racer. Gerard knew bike racing, and he knew business, and he knew how to market bike racing, and he knew how to serve the members. And he understood how to grow USA Cycling. But unfortunately, he took over USA Cycling at a time where the Steve Johnsons of the world wanted to sort of funnel
he
all
was a
of
marketing
it into
guy, and that's what the sport has lacked, is a marketing guy. Like when you looked at USA Cycling through the 80s and early 90s, their whole business sense revolved around the Olympics, and they had a marketing plan that revolved around their main funding at USA Cycling revolved around Olympic medals. They were largely funded by USOC, which said if you get Olympic medals, then we'll give you additional funding. So they focused completely on the track.
And that's still a big portion.
It is. It's a disproportionate amount of attention. And listen, I'll get into this. And the reason I asked you earlier today, what was our focus when we sent the Myerson Manifesto? When I was in USA Cycling, we went up there. We said to these folks, like, if your attention is really on growing the sport and making the sport better, you need to focus on a couple of things. And at that point, this is what, 92, 93?
No. Late 90s, early 2000.
No, I don't agree with that. I'm sorry. No, you're right. Early 90s, 2000, 2002. Yeah. 2002. Not 92. Yeah, that's right. 2002, yeah, exactly. We go up there and we say, listen, collegiate cycling is the future of women's cycling. If you want to see women introduced to the sport and flourish, women's cycling is your opportunity. Collegiate cycling in general is the growth of the sport. We talked about cyclocross and the need for a national cyclocross series that was independent of any Super Cup series. And we put forth a number of ideas which I think have proven themselves out over the last 10 or 15 years. And at that time, they were laughed off. USA Cycling went, now that'll never work. That's not going to. And you know what? In the end, the future of the sport domestically relies on collegiate cycling. If you ask me, I think that's where the opportunity really exists. The business side of the sport has placed itself out of the marketplace. When you have to pay $3,000, $4,000, $5,000 for a bike to be able to compete, that's fucking absurd. I got 3 kids. They're all really good athletes. I got a daughter who's a national level collegiate athlete. I wouldn't let her ride her bike. I mean, I wouldn't let her ride her bike because it's fundamentally unsafe at this point. I would let her do cyclocross. But even if she wanted to race her bicycle, I couldn't afford to get her involved. I mean, I couldn't.
Yeah. I understand. Like I'm paying entry fees now, and it's not like I didn't know what entry fees
$45 bucks for a fucking hour-long crit? It's ridiculous.
Yeah. No, yeah. Well, I mean, that's a whole other show too. And bringing that back around to Derek and the future of the sport, I think at the very least, like, Derek has identified all these things and understands all these challenges and is trying to figure out, like, USA Cycling is not going to survive trying to hide in its corner and solve all its problems in the way that it previously did. It knows it needs a new model, and he's exploring that new model. And I really do think, like, he has the business savvy, but also the understanding of the sport to do it, to make it happen. And I guess, if we want to close out on that, like, success of cycling in America, there's a lot of different levels we could have that conversation at. Like, we started talking about success at, like, the pro cycling level, and we finished by talking about success at the participant level. And they're related, they're connected. Absolutely. One feeds the other. Collegiate cycling might be the thing. Like, even USA Cycling doesn't invest in juniors like they once did, because they realize that juniors are a losing proposition. Juniors don't pan out. It's better to spend your money on under 23s. Under 23s pan out. Juniors, beer and college. But the under 23s, if you're still in it as an under 23, okay, now we know you're serious, and now we'll spend some money on you. So we should stop there. Sure. It's a good place to stop. We could jam out all night. We could just have a show about Marco Rulo and frozen yogurt.
Compton.
Bill.
Yeah,
thanks so much for coming on.
I had a bunch of shit I wanted to talk about, but I hope we covered the things you wanted to do.
It's amazing. I mean, we're almost an hour and a half in. It's amazing how fast the time goes by when you're just jamming out. And I think for you and I too, when we have some catching up to do, this could be a 3-hour conversation over beers, and it might only be interesting to us at that point. But, well, thanks again, Bill Laudien. Thanks everybody who tuned in for and listened and left us some comments. Sounds like we had a couple of technical difficulties that hopefully will get sorted out in the editing process, and everything will sound good on the podcast when it goes up on Friday or Saturday, and we can all give it another listen. So,
all right, brother.
Thanks again.
Good to see you.